Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. Chris is filming and finishing up a video. So it's just kind of me hanging out for this pre-show. Hopefully y'all are having a good day. Got that right there. Let's see here. Doing some final preparation. All right. Well, I'm just gonna fill some air time. Gonna talk. How is everybody doing this morning? What's going on, Ethan? Back again, doubling up. How's your work day going today? Let's see here. I wonder if it will send the sound to you guys if I unmute Chris's stream for just curiosity's sake. Let me know if you guys are able to hear that at all. Hey, what's up, Shalobi? And then if I pull up my mixer, doing some programming at an oil gas site. Okay. I'll just mute that because it's distracting me. Hey, Yuki, how are you doing today? Ba 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 ba. Yeah, y'all should be able to hear that. I'm still trying to learn how this whole soundboard works. So TTH says, I have to say that I've been enjoying the Asmon streams before he got into Final Fantasy 14. I could have cared less about him, but watching him doing the coil blind is just epic, in my opinion. Honestly, I don't think that's just your opinion. I think it's something that it's fascinating from a numbers perspective. We're seeing huge amounts of growth within Final Fantasy 14, not just off the backs of Asmon. I think this is kind of where hard work meets preparation in terms of what Yoshi P and the development team have done. Yes, you could call it kind of luck. You know, obviously Asmon has a large community that hangs on off his words. But beyond like those words alone, you end up having a community that this breaks down barriers, whether they come and play Final Fantasy 14 or not. So I think essentially when you look at what WoW has been doing and what Final Fantasy's been doing and what other video games have been doing, I think just gamers are really hungry. I was hanging out in Ninja stream yesterday and they're all like playing like the latest Call of Duty Warzone or whatever, and just remarking on how right now there's this massive shift into MMORPGs really on Final Fantasy. Like I go look at Final Fantasy here on Twitch and the numbers have been higher than we've ever seen in our lives. And I think that's really important about getting the game out in front of more people and playing it. And then with Asmon having him, just like with Scott Zone, it was something that was just truly interesting to see overall, because with Scott Zone, he was doing the minimum eye level challenges. He came from that raiding background in World of Warcraft, and he generally like really enjoyed what he was experiencing. And so that's what I think we're seeing a lot of right now. A lot of gamers are experiencing major aspects of what we've been saying, what we've been evangelizing, as people say, for so long. It's just the greatness of what this game is, and you know, just how like awesome this community can be and is. So let's see here. Shinobi says, I've been, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering names. Welcome to the channel. This is the first time. You should know that, but hopefully by now. I was amped to find your channel as a new MMO player and a new Final Fantasy 14 player. Some of the older videos have helped me out so much. Well, welcome both to Final Fantasy XIV and to the MMORPG. I obviously tend to be biased and really enjoy MMOs greatly. And I think essentially we've seen, things move into a direction not with the MMO. And that's due to market conditions, that's due to changing technologies. And I think obviously consumer hunger. So the more people who are coming to check out MMORPGs for the first time is a massively awesome thing. It's massive. It's huge. And so I think that's exciting. So welcome. And then TTH says, been playing Final Fantasy 14 since 1.0. So it's very exciting time for the game. So what fellow 1.0 player, me and TTH, that's incredible. We've been sticking with this game for quite a long time, you and I. So yeah, excellent. And then Ethan says, would it be wild to get them on the podcast to talk about this experience so far? Yeah, it would be pretty wild to get Asmon. I know we Bellular's expressed interest, even though I don't have like his direct connection, but like hanging out in chat, he wants to continue to play the game, and he's definitely expressed interest, which I think would be exciting. He was on the Allcraft podcast yesterday, so I think that's a really good thing to see more people talking about it and how ultimately like the evolution of these these old podcasts now, everything kind of really driving and beating the Final Fantasy drum. It's got to be exciting, and that's probably part of what Chris and I will talk about today in terms of like some expression of concern, because there are still lots of veterans on a break from the game. There's a lot of veterans who are like, great, I'm ready to go when Endwalker drops. And yet we're seeing this surge, and it's selling out codes, and beyond selling out codes, it's you have queues in the middle of the day and breaking records on Steam and over the weekend. And the question is that will this weekend bring another record-setting set of numbers? Will this weekend once again see the store have to take a break? I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. Yes, Ethan, we definitely I'm gonna hopefully be playing some Final Fantasy 14 tonight. So if you guys are following over on Ginger Prime, I'm probably gonna stream some tonight and do some maybe some deep dungeon. Maybe we'll do some raid. Who knows? Trying to keep it fluid with no set start time, because for some reason when my kids hear me go upstairs, I think that tells them they can run amok, and then Julie calls me stressed out because apparently they won't go to bed when she tells them to go to bed. And apparently they listen to me in this regards. I guess I'm scary at night. Go to bed. What are you doing out of bed? I've seen Chris stream when he's been in the cities, and it's like laggy. And it was to the point where I was like, man, I would love it if they'd rejoin the cities together, because in Kugane, in Crystarium, they're all like one connected city. But in like the three starting cities, they're split up into two zones. And I was like, yeah, how cool. Like, it'd be so nice to see them return into one zone again. And then it's like, even still, seeing such surging in these cities is insane. So Ethan says, your prediction that pre-night launch and launch day, you're going to see 2K, 2,000 people queue times. I don't think a 2,000 person queue is all that bad. I feel like Final Fantasy does a really good job at like funneling people in. I think if the way the trends keep going, I could easily see that we'll be at 2K just on a normal weekend perspective. I've seen a couple hundred so far, and it keeps growing. That's gonna be interesting to see how the servers flex on that. You hope they so Kyrian says, I hope that they give us a little developer blog or talk about the explosion of the game. It'll be kind of curious to see if Yoshi P writes a letter. I don't think I don't know if a dev blog would actually do it justice. Those are usually in my mind like a little bit more humorous. The fan of the air is blowing on me right now. I was like, oh, I'm a little cold. It's nice that I can have the air on and have a good time. Let's see if Chris is about to join in. Unmute. Cool. He's wrapping up. So, yes. Coral is crazy packed. I'm curious just to see what's the highest queue number that y'all have seen so far. So Shadowbringer set the story bar so high, it's hard to think that what could be done better. It's incredibly hard to think, and that's why I would recommend not like just. I don't know. Like I trust the writers. I like that the theme for the expansion of Endwalker is have fun. I think that's going to be huge and exciting. And yes, I think Shadowbringers had such a compelling villain. I really appreciated it. Yeah, and like in NA, we've got 3 data centers. EU's got 2. Japan's got 3. Oceanic's not coming on until 6/1. More servers. Like we've always said, it's not a switch. It's not like they're like, oh, let's turn on the reserve servers and let's go from there. It's always going to be a challenge, especially right now with Silicon being such a huge bottleneck. Hey, Caitlin, thank you so much for hitting that membership. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much for that support. You are the first podcast legend, by the way, Keelan. Supporting the show. So if you guys haven't seen, like, I hopefully will remember to cover it as part of our kickoff. But the podcast shows are now day and date with the with it when the full thing goes up, and that's thanks to the support. I'm gonna switch. Whoa, hey, what's up, man? Hey, are you able to share your screen through this? Like, can I set you as a host?
Share screen.
Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome.
What do you want?
I want you to pull. I want the article, the discussion topic regarding like the server space capacity and concerns and stuff of that. The only reason I am going to have you manage that share is that when I'm doing it, it records just fine. But for some reason, I guess something on my PC struggles right now with the new Go XL LR. So I'm still troubleshooting it. So I can share and control it, but you might cut out. It will be perfectly fine in the recording, but I might not be able to hear you.
Okay. What am I pulling up?
I want you to pull up the Reddit discussion. You were saying you were going to talk about it. I can send you a link if you need.
Okay.
Reddit.
This one.
Let's see.
All right. I think we're all set.
The ramifications, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Chat says, "Hey, Chris."
Cool. Let's do it. What are we talking about?
We're going to be talking Final Fantasy 14. I think we're going to open up with that topic. Let me see if there's any newsy news. And then just generally, yeah, we're just gonna talk about.
My hair is getting incredibly long, but not long enough to put in a ponytail. It's just in this weird non-man bun state.
Mm-hmm. And I think we'll talk about summer plans. We'll talk about have you caught any of Asmon's raids? Doing the coil?
No, I haven't, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm gonna watch him tomorrow.
Okay, well then, yeah, we'll skip over
once Claire leaves town. No, I'm aware he's through. So he's through T9 now. He's on T9 now.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive.
Super exciting stuff.
I'm looking forward to watching it.
All right.
I appreciate they clip it.
Oh yeah, it is by far like one of the best content generation machines.
I'm excited.
Thanks.
I'm excited.
bring back Fluffy Dogs hitting membership over here on Work to Game. Appreciate that, man. Bahamut activated. All right, I'm hitting record. We're gonna record podcasts, guys. If you feel like weighing in, just like ask any questions, we'll try to highlight them. Just like Kyrian says, 200, 300-ish here on their queue times. So we'll ask questions and you guys weigh in, and we're gonna have a hopefully good show. All right, let's see here. I'm recording. Perfect. And here we go. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Core Radio Podcast, episode 80. My name's Brian, and joining me is, as always, Chris, my illustrious co-host and co-captain here over at Work to Game. Guys, this is an MP3 podcast, also a video podcast. You can join in live on Twitch, YouTube, and also now pretty much wherever podcasts are found. Feel free to listen in on your Samsung fridge. You can subscribe, and these podcasts are brought to you day and date via the generous donations of you guys. Luke contributed a full year's worth of support for the podcast. So thank you, Luke, for your support. And thank you, everybody, so much for just kind of hanging out with us. As today, we're going to be diving into the world of Final Fantasy XIV, the state of the game, if you will. Chris streams this Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., with Fridays typically focusing in on actually Guild Wars, two incredible MMORPGs. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. A surge in MMORPGs. So much so, some players are concerned. Chris, do we want to dive into the first topic, or do you want to just kind of give everybody a rundown of what you've been working on in game?
No, I think that's exciting. I'm just churning through content. I'm just trying to broaden my horizons, get to all the things that I always say I'm interested in those, and I just don't have the time. It's much easier now that I have more time to play to get through not only the stuff that I normally do, but get through a whole lot more. So the first topic here is talking about new players, right? What happens with Final Fantasy XIV being at record popularity levels, which, it's not uncommon to see them set and break previous records. Shadowbringers had an incredible interest going in and had developed an incredibly large interest early on and has been popular throughout. So queue times are not something that I'm concerned when I see. It's something we've had throughout patch days. We've had, logging in. We've even seen them go as far as to start turning on AFK timers and things, which they are not currently on. And so we've seen them when those start to get large in the past. So it could be worse. I will say that disproportionately right now, because our top end scene might be at a point where if you're done with relics, if you don't have any other boss fights that you want to work on, this might be a time that for veteran players is a really great time to take a break, knowing full well that no matter what other game you're going to go play in the meantime, you are absolutely coming back November 19th, no matter what. Doesn't matter if that other game's the greatest game of all time. It's not better than Endwalker. And so you'll be back. And so those people are away. And what that means is for the game to be that popular right now, it's a lot of sprouts. And so Limsa, Ul'dah, Gridania, these places are I don't know about you, but I'm running into lag in them. I'm running into frame stutter. I'm running into kind of things appearing in weird orders where you get to actually see what the draw order is when you bring up the screen, as opposed to usually that's so fast your computer and the server just handles it faster than your eye can kind of detect it. So, it's all there. No, I'm seeing what order things render in because it's playing out in real time. I'm fine if I go to the first. I'm fine if I'm out in Stormblood content.
Yeah.
It's so I know it's not me. It's specifically these early capital cities.
So let's break down the discussion post here. There's some questions, and even below it, a couple of interesting points that we want to highlight. But it starts with, wanted to get a little bit more focused discussion on the this momentous occasion. While there are no lucky Boncho numbers, several other indicators point that Final Fantasy XIV is having a bigger active player base than ever before, even while in a pre-expansion content dip. And so kind of on that subject, if you guys aren't really aware, in terms of flow, because you're new, welcome to Final Fantasy XIV. We're so glad you're here. Typically, this is the time where players who maybe played through the previous expansion story, they'll take a break usually around the 0.1 patch, which happens a couple of months after the expansion drops, and they typically come back around this time. So seeing a surge during this 5.5, to the expansion isn't atypical. What is atypical is that it's not just a surge in players who are coming back for prepping for Endwalker, who took a couple patches off, or but I'm seeing 1.0 players coming back. I'm seeing players who haven't played since 2.0 coming back. I'm
Yep.
seeing on the largest streams, outside of Asmon, because I think Final Fantasy 14 is literally just crushing over on Twitch right now. But outside of just one guy, it's not just one guy. We got Co Carnage. We've got so many others that even what you would consider like the most popular group of streamers literally are talking about what is going on. MMORPGs are surging, but Final Fantasy is like leading this pack. Players are hungry for an amazing game, and that's what Final Fantasy has been. Everybody's like, Final Fantasy didn't do anything different. It's been crushing this whole time. Everybody just hasn't, in my mind, been playing close attention. Anyway, I'm gonna let Chris weigh in because we've only made it for the first sentence on this article.
So I think the natural tendency here is, Brian is the optimistic one here, and so when I look at society and we look at just human nature, and you take a history class and you view it as a story being told, when there's times of plenty, everybody's in a good mood. It's not hard for a game to be good when it's good. It's not hard for people to be friends when everybody's happy and there's plenty to go around. When you see people's underlying, the parts of themselves that maybe they want to work on, the parts of themselves maybe they're not proud of, when you see the parts of humanity that we don't brag about, it's typically in times of scarcity, when there's a lack of resources. And so in the gaming world, when you start to see them not able to distribute complete editions, and so you have a friend coming into the game and they literally are saying, hey, we're not distributing codes right now, not because we can't spin up an infinite number of codes, but because we can't promise the service that those codes imply. And so when you start to see people getting wait times, when you start to see people, certain servers kind of bogging down and certain market board behaviors being atypical, and you feel like your way of life is under attack by this change, by this delta, it's easy to want to seek out something to blame, something to hate, something to be frustrated at. And so I don't think this one is written that way. But I have seen a lot of frustrations. And so it's why I'm really hesitant to kind of fall into that, like, Twitter, let's get it down to 144 characters. Like, oh, Asmongold caused this by himself. No, he's had probably at this point millions and millions of people stop by his stream, but many of those people were already 14 players. Many of those people still aren't going to play 14. If they are, it's not like, well, we actually found Asmongold in your browser history. You have to play on Cactar now. Like, I'm sorry. Like, we tried to log you in. We wanted to put you on a recommended server. You live in the EU. I wanted to get you on an EU server. Unfortunately, because you've watched 1 minute of Asmongold, you have to go to Cactar now. Like, that's not the case. And it's not just him. We've had enormous impacts. I think Zeppel has had a huge impact on new players.
Yes.
The marketing campaigns, the Fat Black Chocobo campaign, the come back and log in for free campaign, all these returners coming back and getting free hours between now and August 23rd or whenever it is. All the advertisements, FanFest, 14-hour live streams, tons and tons of YouTube views, being on top of the Twitch directory, word of mouth. People are just excited to talk about this game right now. And so, my sister is going to try out the free trial. She downloaded the free trial yesterday for the very first time, critically acclaimed free trial. My sister has known I've been playing this game since I got here. And that's not, she doesn't know who Asmongold is. And so it's not any one thing. So at the front of this, the pessimistic side of me being afraid that where there's smoke, there might be fire, where there's this growth to the point that people are concerned about it, there might be a seed that could turn into whose fault is this? I want to make it incredibly clear. It's nobody's fault. The game is really good. And the fact that you like it means other people like it too, maybe for different reasons. And that's a good thing. Queue times on a Monday morning is a good thing. You don't want to have your favorite restaurant never have a wait. It's really nice for you right up until they close.
I've got some breaking news. Interestingly enough, Asmon just tweeted out that his mother is starting to play the critically acclaimed version and joining him on stream. I'm completely joking. But, it's at the point where whenever things hit a critical mass is usually when my mom asks me about it. I don't know if anybody else experiences that. Like, you get that text like, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about Final Fantasy 14. Is this really good for you, Brian? I guess. Like I've been loving this game forever. Thanks, Mom. I'm glad that you've taken interest. She's always been interested in the stuff that I did. I think she was our first subscriber here at Work to Game. OG Final Fantasy support. All right, continuing into the post. Some may say that most of the new players are trial accounts, but the new record of players on Steam, which does not include the free trial, and the digital store running both out of codes, the game indicates that a large number of these players are new subscribers. What are your guys' thoughts on this unprecedented and unexpected boost in the player population, and how will it pan out? Square Enix does not have enough time, for example, to add more servers, data centers before Endwalker's launch, and I hear Yoshida's talking about Endwalker's already has over 3 times as many pre-orders as Shadowbringers has sold. And at the time of this writing, I'm betting that's going to go up more and more. What's your thought?
I hadn't heard 3 times. During the 14-hour broadcast, he said at this same point, with the same number of weeks to go, they're at roughly 160 to 180% of the previous ones. So I don't know where we got to 3 times. If we have, it would not shock me if we've gotten to 3 times in the whopping like 10 days since then. But it is rapid. And that tells me like people are paying. These are paying customers. When I'm running dungeons, I've been doing a ton of leveling. I'm thinking about moving to leveling kind of as all 4 days a week right now, minus my Wednesdays. I'd be focused on working on best in slot for crafting, but I've thought about kind of dropping my tanking stuff and just doing leveling on stream, because it's getting me a chance to ask a lot of questions, to answer a lot of questions, to be there and to help and to be in these Sprout groups. It's really fun to go run with all these new players and be in dungeons where it's their first time. I'm really enjoying that. And as I level classes I've never leveled before, I'm in Sestasha, I'm in Todorok, I'm in these really low level dungeons. And when you're in there, I'm checking search info on them, and I'm of course seeing people that have several 60s and looks like they're on the free trial, or this is their first run of that on their main, and so they're level 20 for the very first time or something like that. But I'm also seeing a fair bit of people with a 77 or a 73, or I saw somebody the other day where they were basically 70 and everything and had that looks like a returner to me. And that tells me those are paying customers. So this is not just free trials. We have seen games cap on free trials before. 11, I think, went through this when Ninja first picked up 11 publicly. He's been a huge Final Fantasy fan for a long time. I think his whole life. And so we've seen games cap on free trials before. We've seen free trials get more limited when behavior around them starts to affect the playing base. People used to be able to do PvP in free trials in 14, and people couldn't be trusted with that. So the selling out is a good thing. This is a great thing. This is awesome. The fact that they can't keep up. The downside is it's happening so fast and so close to the expansion that Yoshi said at the 14-hour broadcast that they are literally throwing millions of dollars at new server space, and it will not be ready for Endwalker launch. And to people that don't deal in all of this stuff, they're like, it's not that hard. Like, I set up a Squarespace thing and I made it bigger right now. And so to me, who's not a programmer, I spend a lot of time around programmers, but to me, just
and
for a second,
help Ginger me, programmer adjacent, this guy right here, kind of
understand why you can't just throw millions of dollars. Why you don't just go to AWS and say, hey, Amazon, just spin up more, like just more. What's the problem here?
So Mr. S writes, I disagree that they don't have time to make new worlds per Square Enix. New data centers, though, is unlikely until 6.1. So we know they are targeting the oceanic data centers for 6.1. Regarding new worlds in that regards, there's a silicon shortage. I think essentially what in a fortuitous shortcoming of the moment is that it's hard to get hardware. Actually, it's more of a hardware limitation and time. Okay. But if you think about what even Phil Spencer talking about, hey, yeah, we're trying to make sure we're getting enough parts for Xboxes. So it's not just you're competing against like, oh, this other company wants a server and I want a server. Okay, this is the price of the server, but everybody needs the silicon, the parts that make up these servers, and there's like this massive backlog of things that need to be made. Where even to the point of cars,
right?
New cars need silicon. It's like they like all of these things. Everything's kind of back ordered, backlog, and that's just a impact of the world that we're living in. So I think it's just going to be something where that's why we're seeing limitations on the key, so that people when they use that key, they can hopefully make a character and have service, as opposed to like, I bought this game and it's been 2 months and I still can't play it. I think that's the story that we don't want. If you couldn't
Right.
make your character day in day one, but most likely the only person that's going to really kind of be frustrated is somebody who doesn't know MMOs. Well, you can go log in at 3 a.m. You can make your character and go from there. I'm not saying it's perfect. I am not trying to defend Square Enix in this regards. Like, it is a windfall by all means, and hopefully everybody who gets a key can get a key if they want one, and make a character and go from there. But
it's a great problem to have, that too many people want to come to the concert venue, but you can't just keep charging money at the door if you don't have seats. Like, you can't just keep letting people in and be like, well, we took all their money, they're inside now, that's their problem. And like, you have to make sure that everybody's going to be able to see the service that you offered to provide.
Now, before we continue, one second though, but Bring Black Fuffly actually is kind of pointing out something that I think is interesting for a discussion. I'm sure Microsoft will happily help you out with Azure. I'm sure Google is also there, and I'm sure Amazon. When you look at kind of the three big pillars of cloud hosting, I don't think it's a switch, right? Like, let's say Square Enix signed today with Microsoft. I don't think it's like an instant switch where all of a sudden all their servers are virtualized in the Azure cloud. I think ultimately that's something that Microsoft would want to win the bid on, but Google and Amazon both want to win the bid on their cloud hosting. But yeah, like, I would say that Microsoft would be like, you can have these servers, just bring it to Game Pass.
Anyway. Yeah, and there's a valid point being brought up over here by Virtual that hype is temporary. We saw this with WoW Classic. People were like, why don't they just spin up more worlds? When at the time they did have the room to spin up more worlds. And they said, because an MMO is about interactions. And our concern is, what if all of these people are here to try Endwalker and a percentage of them don't like it? We look at past expansions and we say, we feel we've done our best work, and we feel like we've tried really hard in the past, but inevitably we lose a percentage of players. And when you're talking about this many active players, when you're talking about the fact that it looks like they picked up 1 or even 2 million players this year, if not more, which means that the active numbers are probably really close to that, because those aren't long-time players where they would fall off naturally. There hasn't been an opportunity for them to really fall to attrition. When you talk about that, you have to assume, okay, a percentage of that, even if it's a small percentage, represents a huge number of people. And so what if you spend time and money to spin up a server, you get players on that server, and then that server becomes a dead server? That a dead server on an MMO is a miserable experience. If you've ever played a game that was meant to have social interaction that didn't, you go to run content that can't be run. You go to buy something off the market board that isn't listed. You go to sell something on the market board that never sells. You go to find a group for something and it just isn't there. And so it really kills a lot of these features. So I do think, as far as just spinning up more worlds, as far as just doubling the number of worlds per data center or something like that, that would be an incredibly risky move if you didn't believe you could hold this pace.
100%. I see Chad also talking about how one of the reasons is that Microsoft doesn't really have a presence in Japan. And while that has been true historically, they are right now gaining a lot of ground with Game Pass and xCloud, because of the mobile, the lightweight, the Xbox Series S is actually incredibly popular over in Japan. So Microsoft, obviously I would say they need to do a lot more work when it comes to that area. But what we're not talking about a console port of Final Fantasy 14. That's not. I would not expect that announcement this year, maybe even next year. No, but what we're talking about is the behind the scenes, right? Microsoft, outside of that, Microsoft has partnered with Final Fantasy 14 before to promote Final Fantasy on Windows. Like, they have a relationship, and when it comes down to it,
Microsoft's the back end of a lot of things. That's one of the reasons when we saw. Oh, what company was it that the governments were all talking about nationalizing, and they were trying to sell it off? And Microsoft was one of the bidders. And one of the concerns was, well, Microsoft has relationships with the Chinese government, right? Microsoft has relationships with, Russia, these various governments around the world. Microsoft is an enormous company. So when you talk about partnering with Microsoft, that doesn't mean Xbox. That doesn't mean Phil Spencer. When you talk about using web services, when you talk about kind of using server space and things like that, when you talk about companies that have names like Rackable that the general population doesn't know, and you talk about services like Azure and AWS and all this, and you get into this terminology, there's a backbone to the internet that, yes, does include names like Facebook, but not in a traditional sense. Like, Facebook owns part of the transatlantic lines that connects the US to Europe, actual literal lines that run underneath the ocean. And so, like, when you talk about this infrastructure, while some of the names are names you represent for their more household products, a relationship with Microsoft on a server end would be very different than like what Sony's relationship with Square Enix is.
But there is a business level,
TikTok,
development in that regards to sit down and say, well, we'll happily give you this incredible deal at an incredible price if we consider this other deal in the future. So business is business. Now, I'm going to put up on screen a thing talking about the new Stream Deck just because I want to come back to that here in a minute. I don't want to derail us just yet. So guys, if you're watching this on Work to Game in our kind of our highlights of the podcast itself, be sure to look forward to this discussion when we talk about the new Stream Deck here in a minute. But like, favorite, subscribe, share, and don't forget to clip. Send us your clips of the podcast and videos that you guys like the most. I'm very curious to see how that goes, and we'll try to be. I'm going to try and turn those into shorts. But Chris, let's go ahead and continue on with this post because I want to also get into that first top comment.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just having to scroll down.
Oh, okay. I forgot I was driving.
Yeah, sorry.
Like, you do you. I forgot.
Yeah, I know.
We don't
it's
do
like
this. We're doing this live. Usually I don't host this. I'm just here for the ride.
You're just here. I'm just having fun, man. So it says, I think it's important to note that they not only have the new Steam records have been set, but they've also absolutely been smashed. Prior to this, the peak was actually 41,000 players at the release of Shadowbringers. They hit 58,000 players on Sunday, with the last patch being 5.55 at 1.5 months ago, and Endwalker doesn't come out for 4 months. I honestly think this isn't a perfect time, or I honestly think this is the perfect time for a lot of new folks to get into the game. 100% agreed. If they're going to play through the 2.0 to 5.55 in 4 months, it's an appropriate time frame to do so fairly casually. If we refrain or retain a decent fraction of these new players who've picked up the game up recently at 6.0 launch, it's going to be packed. I don't know why or how that plays out, but maybe it's promising that we're going to hit such a new peak and this past weekend without any server exploding to my knowledge. The game is stable. The game is amazing. And people have a huge chunk of amazing game to play in a sea of drought, in a sea of Cyberpunk failing, in a sea of this next big game disappointment. And then they step into this and they're like, I've been hesitant to play Final Fantasy XIV this whole time, but now I've gotten over that wall, that hurdle. There's still people on the other side of that wall, and we're going to welcome you guys in. Come on over. It's safe. There's not going to be too many cat girls like messing with you. I saw somebody post a comment talking about cat girls. I was like, I wouldn't worry about it. Just use that Doge can. Just to watch out for that Doge can. You don't have to worry about it. But yeah, 58,000 on Steam. That's not PlayStation numbers. That's not your standard PC numbers.
Probably the least recommended platform. Not as a dig on Steam, but just compared to the other three, I think it's the one that I hear the least about. So I can't imagine those numbers are anything but larger on the other three. Yeah, because like PlayStation has just invited it to people that want an MMO on consoles. Like the PlayStation's just invited in tons of people, and this game has incredible controller support. Buying it direct from the website keeps you out of Steam. So there's your Microsoft, and then Mac players are like, well, what are you going to do? I'm just excited this game runs on Mac. So I think the appropriate time frame is something where we're like, now is the appropriate time frame, and we've been saying that since 5.5, and then we said it again in 5.55. There will come a time where we're like, I want to tell you now, but I really mean before. Like it's like the amount of time is compressing, and the amount of content you have to get through is not. The reason this is such an exciting time to get into the game is not because it's popular. It's not because people are playing it. It is because you have an exciting expansion going into an exciting expansion content-wise that has been delivering consistent content when the genre has not been necessarily capable of keeping up with that. You've got an enormous backlog of content. You've got a massive free trial to get into it. And narratively, this is the finale in 6.0. While the game is not ending, the finale is happening in November. The full finale releases in November. And 6.1 will begin a new story where the game continues from there. And so you are getting the opportunity to be told that you have this like Super Bowl style event that you have
Mhm.
this final season of a TV show. It's the final season of Breaking Bad, and you know that now. And so you have 4 months to say, I've been meaning to watch that show. And you have 4 months to sit down, strap in, and binge all of it.
Yeah.
And even though you could have been here for the last many years, you will literally be on equal footing with everybody who was. You can catch up. You can be here with us, just as invested, just as excited, totally right there with us. And you didn't have to take the risk over the last several years of what if this doesn't build towards something awesome. You have the advantage of hindsight. So it's an incredible time for new players to come in. They've made it an incredible value proposition at a time when the market is, while we have many MMOs coming online and we have a ton of excitement going into 2022 and 2023 in the space, 2020 was really hard on a lot of industries, and MMOs were no exception. And so 14 being effectively like almost boringly normal actually kind of makes them like best in class. Like, what did you guys do? A little bit less than usual. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it is telling though, but it's like this perfect storm where I would is 14 lucky? No, they're prepared. They're prepared. They've been doing this. They've been ready. They've made an incredible game that people love to share and talk about, to the point where when these other situations align, 14 Surge isn't just driven off the fact that Asmon's playing it. It's not driven off the fact that there's a massive dissatisfaction with WoW. And then the fact is that some players are still obviously enjoying WoW, which is a great thing. It's not driven off of any one factor. It's driven off of fundamental good game design, great communication, a community that loves the game, and players that are coming into the game and experiencing it for the first time, and then becoming evangelists to the game itself. We're going to start seeing here, if we haven't already. I haven't seen any videos yet, but I'm just waiting. There's two numbers that I'm looking to see. One is that 58K going to go up? And, is that the ceiling? Is that the new ceiling? I doubt it. So I'm excited to see if anything happens big this weekend, and to see what kind of this growth pattern looks like. And when's it going to be, like, wow, that was the apex. And then 2, when are we going to start to see the hate, negative videos that are going to capture attention flowing out on YouTube? It's like, I'm just waiting for those two events to kind of occur. Like, what's the highest number? And then, because of the surge, like with anything, you always kind of have the anti, surge in certain aspects. And so those are the two things.
14 is really good at 14 because it's so narrative based. There is a substantial portion of the population that literally plays the 0.0 patch. And then historically, we build up to the expansion with 0.4, 0.5. This one's working a little different because it's a finale. And so historically, what would happen is people would play 0.0 to 0.1, right? As 0.1 drops, they'd peace out. And then they'll come back sometime through the 0.4, 0.5 cycle, blast through everything they missed, hit the expansion, and then bail again. And so they're here a fraction of the 2-year cycle, where they catch the end and the beginning, and they just catch what they think are the best parts, and they skip all that stuff in the middle because they don't like raid progression. They don't, the story comes out too slowly for them. They don't like all the side content in the game. They really just want this to be a narrative experience, and they can do that, and they can experience all the raid content or all the dungeon content once during that 0.4, 0.5, one time, one clear of everything. We're good. And then they can go into the content. So there will be a fall off after Endwalker, and that doesn't mean Endwalker did bad. That already existed. That's already a pattern in the space.
Well, and even still, like as the fallout goes with those players who play through the story and then say, "Great, I'll see you next expansion." I'm curious to see what ultimately happens with this one, because 6.0 ends the story, and 6.1 begins anew. And with 6.1, as a player, like I'm only like projecting my perspective here, is that if I was taking a break, I finished the story. Okay. But now the next question goes, what's next? And depending on how the story concludes, like, I think that, who knows, maybe we actually will retain more players at least through 6.1 this time around, depending on see how that plays out. And still, I think essentially what we see is that the rising tide, that even, there's a natural drop. There's a natural drop in every game. Every service game you have your build up, and then it's like, okay, it kind of settles into its thing. and then it slowly kind of ramps itself back up, excitement, etc. All somewhat, it's kind of, graphical, for lack of a better term. Go ahead.
No, I think, we've got some big things coming. We've got some big events going on in game. This will be a lot of people's first time to see a media tour coverage. This will be people's first time to experience a job action trailer. This will be the first time, many people are catching their first live letters. I put out the summary of the Q&A from the 14-hour broadcast over on Gaming Kinda. It was 43 questions. Massive. And so, I was asked regularly while I was streaming me putting together that video, where do I get the link to this? Where do I get all this information? And I think a lot of that comes from not being aware of, like, this isn't the last one of these. They roll out the same way every time. They're translated from Japanese. And so there's these processes where we're bringing a lot of people in. And so I have two questions around that. Like, first of all, like, how are people going to feel as they kind of get brought into the norms of the space, the things that you and I have come to expect, where when when I tell my wife that we have a live letter coming up, I don't have to explain it anymore. Like, she knows, so he's going to pull some weird hours in the next week. He's going to talk about 14 way too much. And I'm going to hear him talking in his office too loudly. And then immediately after the live letter, there's going to be some long work days where he's recording summaries or things like that. And so she just knows that's the trend. But also, how do we retain? How do we, how many of these people really stick around? You can incentivize somebody to try. You can give them a free trial. You can pay a WoW streamer to take the risk. You can, invite in communities. You can invite people to return with free returner campaigns. You can do discounted copies of the game. But ultimately, at some point, business has to go back to business as usual. And so when we're sitting in 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and we're going through these typical runs, and we're getting our 2 live letters, then a patch, 2 tomes, and a raid, and we're just moving on through standard content. How many people are here for that? How many people, and there's nothing wrong if you're not. Like, if you just watch the Super Bowl and you don't watch professional sports, if you just watch, I only watch things when it goes to game 7, fair enough. That's fair enough. There's people that only buy the lottery ticket when it's over a ridiculous number. Fair enough. There's nothing wrong with that. There is something fun about being in those key moments where the moment is part of it. But how many people underneath are we really converting? How many people are going, no, I'm here to stay. I'd like to set up shop here in 14 and stick around for the long haul.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I'm just excited as the community grows and welcomes in new players, and finding people who find this as their new home MMORPG, their new community in which that it's not really about progression. It's about playing with friends, having fun, being silly in town, and apparently trying to create some serious lag in one of the 3 starting cities because they're just being overrun. So at the end of the day, like, this is something that is both historic. It's wonderful to see, and questions of, if the servers are up and they're stable, like, honestly, like, let's keep going. Like, if we want to add 1 million new players a month to this game, let's go. I think, at that rate, like, the OCP had a big goal of 30 million. I think when this year started out, and who knew that he would have hit it by the end of the year. We had a goal of hitting 10K followers on Twitch. By the
similar
end of this
numbers.
Year, similar numbers, same scale. Yeah, and we just crossed over 14,000 followers over on Twitch. So thank you to all who hit that button. And now we're setting our next goal at 100,000 here on YouTube. So it's exciting. Like, growth is exciting. It's fun to be a part of, and I'm just glad to see so many people really enjoying it. And it's great. I cannot say that enough. And so we'll just keep covering the game like we always have and go from there. But now I'm going to kind of shift focus into some news that broke yesterday. It's kind of hardware news, but the question that the community brought up is, will the Steam Deck, a Switch-like power, high power PC NVMe device, run Final Fantasy XIV? And so I want to get Chris's thoughts on this, because we've always kind of we've advocated that Final Fantasy XIV should come to the Nintendo Switch. But now in this case, this is a device that has the power, has the processor, it's got the speed. So what do you think, Chris?
So when asked this question, not to the Steam Deck specifically, but to any platform, anytime it comes up, the CEO of Square Enix and Yoshi P have made it incredibly clear publicly. We want to be as many places gamers are as possible. When you ask for more detail, the reason they are not is because there is time and resources that goes into that. It takes a long time, and they support a lot of versions of this game, and they spend a lot of effort trying to keep consistent content up. And so they have to make sure that the desire to bring on a new platform where they don't have players is not going to detract from their ability to deliver to the existing base. And so it is a question of how well set up is it to just receive how it runs on Steam. Like if there's no work there, or if Steam says, hey, we're looking to set up a team to help with integrations, we're looking to pay for part of that. When I worked in the medical space, there was this give and take when we would have integrations with medical systems on whose staff is handling the troubleshooting, whose staff is handling the integrations, whose staff is setting everything up, who's paying if there's a third-party vendor making the go-between, because with personal health data, it gets really touchy really fast. And so like who's paying for it and who's spending the time on it. And so if we're able to provide staff members to oversee it, or if we're able to say, hey, this is going to cost $50,000, we would love to pay $30,000 of it, or we can provide this other service that saves you $30,000 somewhere else.
Yeah.
Those sorts of conversations are not public for very good reason. That's the drawback. So if it's not, that would be why. But if it's an easy conversion, I don't see why not.
So let's I'm going to help define some technical reasons why it's not native on Steam Deck or any kind of Steam device. Steam runs Steam OS, which is a Linux build. And right now, Final Fantasy XIV does not support a Linux build. It can run on Linux via Wine and things like that. But as far as it goes, you can also run Windows on the Steam Deck. You can install Windows, and you can install any game that runs on Windows on a Windows machine.
The Mac version's still Wine-based, right?
I think so, yeah.
And so anytime I'm having an issue with the Mac version, that's likely because it's a Wine wrapper.
Right. So in case of Yoshi P and his team, will they support Linux? Well, the answer could be possibly. I wouldn't expect that before Endwalker. I would expect that it probably is going to be on the roadmap for more and more people, and here's why. Final Fantasy 11, not Final Fantasy 11, daggum all these numbers. Windows 11 is having more and more closer to a kind of a Linux kernel than ever before. So there is a lot of power in Linux. You use a Linux device every day. If you're listening to this, Linux is being used to power a lot of cloud. When I was looking at, always debating, like, should I continue to stay independent? Should I go, etc.? As I had my resume, and they're like, and getting a lot of questions of how much Linux do I know? It's like, okay, I need to be, working more and more in Linux. Stadia, its backbone, Linux. And so essentially, like, if they were ever to do that, like, you could see that point, like, if Final Fantasy XIV comes to Stadia, like, then the question is, why is it not naturally on Steam OS? Because it's Linux. Like, obviously, probably maybe a little bit of work there, but maybe not so much that it, that it's going to be like, hey, you're going to write a native Mac client. Same concept with Xbox, but the specs alone are interesting. Go ahead.
So does that make the Steam Deck a beneficiary of a move to cloud? So if they move to cloud, what happens is you don't announce Steam Deck. You say, here's all of our new places, like
everything.
Like, and so if you roll out a Linux client, does that not? So at that point, that kind of actually makes the Microsoft move something. If there's time and energy spent there, depending on obviously they're not going to be equal, because Microsoft is trying very hard to make it easy to jump from PC to Microsoft to Xbox. But outside of that, like if you just got to pull out of a genie bottle, you just got to pull one new version, it sounds like the Linux version would knock down a lot more dominoes. It would knock down a lot more kind of when they've been talking about things like the Oceania data center, when they've been talking about bringing new servers online, when they've been talking about rebuilding old systems in the back end, things like the companion system, working on things like the trust system, doing the stat squish, getting, a lot of these changes that we've been seeing, they've been throwing around terms like these are 10-year choices. They've been throwing around terms where, yes, 6.0 is going to be the finale of the story, but hardware wise, game systems wise, we are looking out a decade or more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1,000%. Also, when it comes to the Steam Deck itself, it runs, you can run a Chromium-based browser on it, meaning you have access to xCloud, you have access to all the games on the xCloud, Microsoft, you have all the games access on Stadia. Steam in this case is not limiting itself to its only store. So even if, just like with Switch, like you can actually run Stadia on Switch, you can run Stadia on your Xbox. So the question is that I wonder if one day PlayStation will, kind of bend the knee and let, xCloud run in its browser, because the whole Bethesda thing, if you're like, it's exclusive. It's only exclusive if PlayStation decides not to support a Chromium browser on the platform, because that's how you're going to access these systems wherever you are.
Yeah,
but
the typical pushback on cloud is internet access. And for a game that already relies on
100% on internet,
a reliable internet connection, I think the percentage of people that have access to the level of internet connection you need is probably much higher than the general population, because all the people who just don't have good internet at all, they're already not playing 14.
Yeah.
They're already not doing online games as a large portion of their content consumption. So if a cloud solution has, let's say, 20% of the population in the United States geographically, not population density, has access to the level of internet you need, when you filter down to MMORPG players, I think that percentage probably likely spikes, because you've already ruled out. There's already a lot of people that have frustrations with this game. So like, we've talked about this before, but MMORPGs seem primed to be the first games to start having part or even all of their backbones moving to cloud-based solutions, where you're saying, hey, when Limsa has 5,000 people on it,
done.
Your local machine doesn't need to really deal with that. We'll do the heavy lifting, and you just do the pretty stuff at the end. We're all set.
That's why I've said we have yet to experience the golden age of the MMORPG. That's why I say that what we used to define as MMO is done in every platform, right now. Like, where MMO, massively multiplayer, exists in all kinds of genres, not just the MMORPG, what we play with Final Fantasy. But what you just described is essentially the future that I see in, granted, there's still plenty of roadmap, but that's where with Steam Deck itself, I look at that as the perfect cloud local, hybrid, right? Oh, you're not in Wi-Fi? Like, download the game. If it's supported locally, you can keep playing. And then essentially, like, if you're home, you're on like Wi-Fi, you got fast internet, you can stream any game that's possible from this handheld device. And that's essentially what I think will be interesting ultimately see. But to that point about the MMORPG and its evolution, you're right. You can throw thousands of servers and graphics cards. There's 10,000 people, 20,000 people, like, all in this space, and it runs smoothly and it's great. Now the question is it fun?
Well, yes, fun has to be. When we talked about the Yoshipi's slideshow from his development conference panel, kind of came out, and like one of the things that was on it was like fun. That's the thing that's hard to add later. So that simply having the hardware doesn't give you a guarantee. But the really cool stuff is that when you start to have this much hardware, when you start to say, okay, it's not 10,000 players running 10,000 individual solo graphics cards. It's 10,000 players sharing a pool of 10,000 graphics cards. You get to start tackling things like, you hear these terms like negative latency. You get to start tackling these terms that are impossible in the way games work now. Negative latency, the theory is we're just going to pre-render the future. We're just going to take a guess. Here's the options of where we think players are going to go next, and we'll pre-do calculations around those, so that when you send the request, some of the work is already done. We're just grabbing which package you chose, and then we're throwing the other ones in the bin. And so there's concepts here where you get to start to say, okay, in something like Fortnite, where you have 100 people in real time that are all looking at the same bush, why am I having that little plant rendered 100 times separately as separate calculations? How do we share some of that? Like, it seems like I'm redoing the same work over and over and over and over. And so there's some really cool stuff that gets way beyond my brain really fast when you talk about like what really sets Stadia apart. To the average user, Stadia right now, for many players, is just a harder to use GeForce. Like, it just, they're not getting to see what makes Stadia truly incredible, because there hasn't been a game built to take advantage of it.
100%. And that's one of the things that's most exciting about what Square Enix announced 2 years ago. Like, they have games in development that are cloud only. And the question is that, and I don't know if the first games that are cloud only are going to blow everybody's mind, because that's the problem. Like,
No, they won't.
You know, because like
They'll be like the first VR games. There will
like,
be Beat Saber and then other games. Like
Other
there
games,
will be
yeah.
one good cloud game, and then it's like 100 cloud games came out this year. Yeah, but did you play that one?
Yeah.
Well, it is just the one, isn't it? Like there one will make it.
But it'll be interesting to see, because sometimes that art being constrained by being constrained by just like physical and like physics limitations in hardware, processing powers and things like that, is something that has made some of the greatest games of all time. We say it here all the time, gameplay is king. When
Right.
it comes to games, you can make the prettiest piece of art, but if it's has no good gameplay, then what are we doing? I see Chad also kind of memeing on, like, I would never play Final Fantasy or an MMO on a handheld device. I was like, well, I guess you don't really craft or gather, because I played 14 on the Vita, and it's like I wouldn't do a dungeon on it, but it was nice to kind of go and just kind of craft and gather a little bit here and there, as just a supplementary piece of hardware. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and so my background is not nearly as technical as Brian's, and so I went to school for design. I'm the artsy one in my family, and one of the things that we were taught is that design flourishes in constraint.
Mm-hmm.
That it's one of the reasons that I see Yoshi P as being really good at fixing games, and when people are like, he's going to be really good at making a game from scratch, and I'm not saying he won't be, but I'm saying temper your expectations, because it's a different skill set. He possibly has both. It is possible he is the world's first primal running around, him and Soken as the two primals in the real world. It is possible, but like it's not. It's also not. It's not impossible that his first one is a learning experience, and then his second scratch title is even better, because it's a different skill set, and so operating within constraint. Is a different way to solve problems, and it creates a lot of really beautiful solutions, and they're beautiful because of the way they deal with problems, not because you got to just. And so studying architecture, they said, like, there is no one perfect building that you just design in space and then you could just drop anywhere in the world. It has to be respectful of where and when and what it's built for. That's what makes it beautiful design. So there's some context there. So I think the problem with cloud storage right now is it seems like it's lifted the constraints, and we've got to learn to operate within what the new constraints are. And those new constraints, the new bounds, they're so far out there that I just don't know that anybody's really really ready to test the space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that anybody saw this level coming or had the resources to invest in what it would take to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and so at the core of it, like exactly what you just said, especially even Mystera kind of following it up, being that they believe Final Fantasy 16 is going to be amazing.
I hope so.
Everything that from lessons learned, like essentially, like, hey, how do we announce a game that's as big as Final Fantasy 16? Well, maybe let's not announce it 10 years, from when we decide to release it, because of all the different issues. Like, they've been working on it. We've known Yoshi P's been working on something, and when it's ready, he's going to show it. And
I think that's a dream team of people.
Oh, dude, he's been consolidating some of the most talented people around him for years.
You gotta have 2 championship rings to get in the door to apply for a job there. Like it's a dream team.
Yeah, somebody sent out like just one of those pictures where it's like, here's because they had the dream team that built Chrono Trigger, and it's like I said it years ago. I was like, I feel like Yoshi P's assembling the new Square Enix dream team as he's starting to bring and work with people, and even even from the latest live letter where Yoko Taro was like trying to just get Yoshi P to leak 16 information. He's got some of the just some of the best people around him, and
I think incredible.
I want it to be, and at the same time, I'm just going to sit back and just kind of hope for the best.
I don't want it to do like an Anthem or Cyberpunk where we've built it up to like, I'm so excited. Final Fantasy 16 is going to save my marriage. Like, don't do that. Like, it's still going to be just a game. I really hope it's good. I really enjoyed Final Fantasy games. I'm really looking forward to it. Really talented people. What we've seen so far looks beautiful and exciting. And having a mainline numbered M-rated title is something that goes back to all these things where when Yoshi P is asked the sorts of questions like, what would you want to be in a game that can't get into 14 because of constraints or because of the way it's designed? Rating is one of those things that comes up. They tackle very adult concepts very early on in this game and very regularly, but they have to tackle them off screen. And so having that M rating is going to allow them to take on some things narratively. It's going to allow the combat system to take on some things, like among other things. There's a lot about 16 that's very exciting. Tempering my expectations does not mean I don't want it to be amazing. It's just that I don't want people starting to say, yeah, I also wrote hate emails to all my existing game developers and I quit them all and I broke all my discs and I burned my consoles that don't run 16. I'm so excited. This game's going to solve gaming forever, because we see that fervency get built up in hype sometimes. And then it comes out and it's like a 9.5 out of 10. And people are like, they robbed me. And it's like, no, that's amazing. Like a 9.5 is amazing.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad we haven't seen any like any more footage from 16. Yoshi P said that they are finished up the English voice acting recording, which is really telling in terms of design and development. That means like we know, like Yoshi P's talked about how difficult voice acting, especially in an MMO, is, because you just so many different regions, so many different time zones. It's a lot of work to get voice acting, and Endwalker is going to have even more than ever before. So then we just track that back to the fact that if that's done, if that's saying, hey, voicing is done, like everything, all these things are done, hopefully we're going to be looking at when the game's ready, like, hey guys, here's 16. Oh, and you can play it today. Like how nuts would that announcement be? Whether it's 2021 or 20, I would assume 2022 at this point. Just how nuts would that kind of be?
Possibly
Oh, we said we were
2023.
working on it. You had the logo. We showed you a little gameplay. And then, like I want that. I would love that for a Final Fantasy game, in terms of, or if nothing else, you could pre-order it today and it's on sale in a month. Like,
it wouldn't shock me if it was targeting next winter. And then, based on that, it wouldn't shock me if it misses the target and moves it to spring. And the advantage of them revealing so little is that that's not a delay, because they didn't promise anything. And so like, until they tell us a date, they can kick that date back internally as many times as they want. The problem is, once you go public with a date, you have to cyberpunk that date. You have to continue to onside kick it 16 weeks at a time, 27 million times, until you're ready to actually deliver the product that you originally promised. And so as long as you don't have to reveal anything, don't do it.
Yeah. Chat's asking, wonder when the next Final Fantasy MMO will be announced. Chris, you got any thoughts on another Final Fantasy MMORPG?
Another Final Fantasy MMORPG. So with Final Fantasy XI Remaster being a project that looks like it's at least on hold or moving internally, or moving to, it at least looks like it's changing. Like I know Diablo 4 Immortal, the Diablo Immortal looked like it was moving, it was NetEase, and then it looked like it was moving internal. Final Fantasy Remaster, it looked like it was maybe something that they were getting help with and they want to bring internal. They looked at it and said, hey, the scope of this is actually bigger than we think. So we're going to stop what they're doing and we're going to bring it in-house. That's what I'm hoping is happening. I would love to see the next Final Fantasy MMO be a bring back of the 11 style. And so I would love to see that come back. My understanding of 11, having never played 11, is that the current state of retail 11 versus the reason private servers exist are two very different games. And so I think there's obviously the fact that two different versions of a previous Final Fantasy MMO can exist in real time, kind of a retail classic type situation, tells me there's enough meat on that bone to build something new. And that would keep them from trying to develop a new IP. I get really nervous with new IP in the space, and I don't want to see a Guild Wars 1-2 or a Destiny 1-2 type mentality where you have to overcome this lack of content early on, because we jumped from 14 that has this whole backlog of, oh, I've never done an ultimate, I'm going to go do an ultimate. Wow, I just spent all these weeks progging in content that's old. And then you get into a new MMO, and there isn't anything there. When you finish the current serving in New World, when it comes out, whether Amazon likes it or not, there won't be anything after that, because there's no past.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, when an update for New World would drop. And so it's gonna, I mean, there's an excitement to that, because we're like, oh man, is there a New World news today or not? From everything they've done prior to this, it's pretty epic in terms of like they had a big update once a month for the alpha, but that's a whole different world. They can do whatever they want when it's an alpha. In production, you have so many more things that you need to consider, but they do have the money to throw at it. Now, for the question to 17, a lot of people mathematically have been like, well, it went 11 MMO, and then 14 was the next MMO. That would put 17 as the next MMO, and that would put, technically, you would think of 15 years into the Final Fantasy 14 brand. Now, my thought is on this. Yoshi P has said that at some point, the number 14 won't make sense. At some point, the number 14 won't make sense. And he teased, maybe we'll call it 20. I don't know.
That's the number he used.
That's the number he used. So when you think about that, Yoshi P said we were going to the moon in 7.0. Maybe he's a little bit teasing a little bit. What's going to be happening? He's cautious. You know, he's going to give himself a little.
I think we can make it to the moon by 7.0. Oh, we got there early.
Hey, wouldn't you know it? So,
space travel was very easy. I expected more resistance.
So on that note, original design before for 14 back in the day kind of had the theory that like the Mog house would be a bridge. So you had a Mog house in 11. Everybody had a house in 11. It was just a room, but everybody had a house. And kind of still salt in the wound there. And so the original kind of idea was that the Mog house would be this doorway into 14. So the games would be connected. Obviously play online, you know, it is kind of a thing of the past, but it was kind of what you would think with Battle.net. If 17 is going to be another MMO, I think it is connected into what we've seen already. I think that's where it gives them a new chance to have an engine update, have like, hey, we're going to change these different things. You know, we don't have to live based off of rule X, Y, or Z from the past. We can do whatever we want. And if they were to do that, as long as your character is connected forward and back, I would love to see a connection with 11 as well. Like if I was playing, let's say, because Chris says it right, like, okay, you're playing and you play 17, it's an MMORPG, and you're like, well, what do I do? Like, there's not a lot of content here because MMOs don't historically launch with an insane amount of content. But it'd be like, if Chris was playing 14, he's like messaging me and I'm getting it in like the new MMO. Hey man, like we're going to go do this. And I just go say, okay, cool. I'm going to teleport to 14. Like I don't have to sit here and log out. I don't have to sit here and do some kind of magic dance. I don't have to worry about X, Y, and Z. I can just go join them and play. Then all of a sudden you're looking at just a massive amount of content with an excited base. Hey, we're going to keep doing 14 stuff, but 17's connected in some way. I don't know. We've got other shards, I guess we assume, whenever what happens, but I'm not personally concerned about it. I think at some point though, like if we're going to be like, we have to have that honest conversation is that at some point 2030 will roll around, 2040 will roll around, and technology is only getting better. And one thing that I think a lot of people will feel when they step and they play New World, you're going to go, holy crap, what could Yoshi P do with this?
Right.
Like
imagine
14
in Unreal Engine.
Yeah. That's the first thing I said. That's the first thing I said when I chopped down a tree in New World and the tree fell down. And other people see the tree fall down, and I'm running the street and I see somebody chopping down a tree and that tree falls down. It's not like this, you know, I'm just farming up this invisible thing. I go, what could Yoshi P do with this? What could he do with this? Like, how do we empower him to do this? And the solution in my mind was we get more people to play 14.
Yeah, no, for as good as the main story is, the world building in 14 could be much deeper if the world itself was capable of being more deeper. And a lot of the limitations comes on what the game was built on. A lot of these limitations comes on how it was built. The way we integrate between zones and all that is how the game was originally designed. And current hardware opens a lot of that up. You get to tell a different story when the trees chop down and when you have the hardware to explore, okay, how do those trees come back? How do they respawn? Do they respawn differently if the pixies in the area have been satisfied, right? When you get to ask these questions, does that start to tell a story about the relationship that the pixies have with nature in that area? Does that start to tell a narrative arc in the way you integrate with the world? Wow, I noticed that this area has been changing lately. I noticed that the way we interact with the world has been changing. What does that tell us about the upcoming story notes? And so there are some opportunities there to more subtly tell a story, to tell it unspoken, to tell it through actions that 14 simply can't do because the engine just isn't there. What I would like to see is if we do get another MMO, if we do get a third MMO in the family, that seems like the ideal time to me to announce one subscription.
One sub.
That way, when that new game launches and it's beautiful and it's amazing and we get in there and our trees fall down or whatever the metaphorical equivalent is. And we realize, yeah, but I don't need to chop down 100,000th tree and there's not another patch for 10 weeks. Okay, well, 14 is still releasing one dungeon, one patch, right? 14 is still moving along. or there's some new seasonal events in 14, or there's a reason to come back, and so there's a crossover event in 14, something, and then in 11 right now this is going on, and so something that invites you into saying this is a family of games, and when you're in them, you can chat across them. You your link shells kind of connect, and you have this ability, and that's one of the things WoW's really classic is a godsend when you have a drought like Shadowlands. Like, it's a godsend. The fact that their numbers, for as much as Shadowlands is hurt and as much as there was drama about TBC Classic, there are a lot of people that can look the other way, because right now when you're subscribed to 14, you look the other way. That's not subscribed to 14. But in Classic, you look the other way and you're like, oh, there's another game over here. And you can just go get lost in that. And that's given them a resilience that thankfully 14 hasn't needed. Thankfully, we've just had good content. But when you talk about launching a new MMO, that's the sort of business decision to me that would say, okay, let's build something from scratch. But that doesn't mean throw 14 to the wayside. That doesn't mean throw it all the way in the bin. Like, either let my character carry over, and so it's effectively just a rebuild within a new expansion, or let my subscription allow me to jump back and forth.
Yeah. More options, more gameplay, and all that. To wrap up today's podcast and show, thanks guys so much for being here. Thanks for all the subs. Thanks for all the follows. Thanks to Keelan for the support financially. And to wrap it up kind of on a final note, Pedro says, if Yoshi P gets his hands on the Unreal Engine, he will become so powerful, not even God himself could stop him. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks for tuning in. If you guys aren't aware, you can also listen to the podcast in MP3 format. You can check out Crystal Core Radio at podbean.com. We are everywhere. And if you are listening to this, please rate the podcast. Honestly, give us your best feedback. If you want to write something as well. I was reading those the other day. I'm really flattered by all the glowing reviews, so I appreciate you guys so much. But yeah, we really appreciate the support, allowing us to do more of these shows for you guys. And thanks for coming in and hanging out. We'll be back next week with even more content. Chris will be live right now or after the filming of this, playing some Guild Wars 2. Who knows? Do may some more reactions and whatnot. It's been quite a summer. It's been quite exciting to see just the amount of growth and love. But Chris, you got any final thoughts before we conclude the podcast?
No, I think it's exciting to have things to talk about currently, where the problems are that there's too many people that want to play 14, and to look out at the future and be aware of this could just be the beginning. 14 is not stopping. 14 is not slowing down. I hope other games can have this level of success. I hope New World does well. I hope Ashes of Creation does well. I hope WoW does well. It would be incredible if this space could get to where it was a question of who was innovating and who was doing the best out of a bunch of good games. I think 14 is more than capable of running their portion of that race. It's an exciting time to be a 14 player.
Absolutely. Guys, that's going to wrap it up for the show for the Crystal Core Radio podcast. My name is Brian, and that's Chris. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Hopefully you enjoy your weekend, and hopefully you enjoy the time and friends that you get to play awesome video games with. We'll see you next time, and take care. We did it.
As an 11 player, do you think what relationship do you think Yoshi P has with the 11 team, or if they're updating 11, what impact do you think he has, or at least awareness of it?
All right, so Yoshi P is in charge of the Final Fantasy 11 team. He's incredibly aware of it. And when it comes down to it, him as an MMO player is Ultima Online. He is a hardcore. He understands. He is an OG MMO player at its core. And so on that very note, he talked about this. There's not a business level or reason that can support that demand for an MMORPG like that. Now, Final Fantasy 11 could be that. I think there is demand, and he acknowledges that players want something like 11 to exist, but not enough essentially that justifies the business level costs of it. And you can say, well, take my money. I want to pay for this. I think a lot of players will, but in terms of MMOs existing not in a bubble, but other games, if you think of the MMO genre competing against something like Game Pass, this is a legitimate issue, right? Because Game Pass is the same kind of cost, but it offers way more attractions,
Yep.
both MMO attractions
No, it's
and
like a Netflix level value in gaming.
Yeah, and then this is the podcast after the podcast, and we're just gonna wrap up with this final thought. So I argue, and I would love to see something of this nature. I've been playing Final Fantasy XI Classic, and it's hard, and the end game starts at level 1. I think that's one of the things I'd love to see MMOs get back to. But the challenge that I would put to Yoshi P, and if I ever get the opportunity to ask this question, especially as it relates to 11, especially as it relates to the need and the desire to have that kind of experience, like the classic coming back, what would it take to have a Final Fantasy 14 hardcore server? You can't transfer off of it, you can't transfer on it, but we're going to turn off some features, maybe like Duty Finder goes away. My voice cracks. Count it. And at the same time, we're going to make the regular mobs out in the world like destroy you. So it forces players to play together. That would be the case study. That would be the experiment that I would like to see if players are just all talk, or what does that community look like? I would venture to bet my theory on this, because that's the kind of gameplay I like when it comes to the MMO, that forcing players together. Obviously, time being constrained, not going to lie. That's why you don't make 14 hardcore. You just make a server that's dedicated to this kind of concept. Do people play it? And does that community, like, what does that community look like? Because you could literally have the A/B test, right? You could say, well, are the which servers are more toxic, the hardcore or the normal servers? And being that you couldn't transfer onto it, every level is hard earned, every level is fought for, etc. And so at the end of the day, it's just something that I would like to see, especially because Yoshi P acknowledging that there is a market, but not a big enough market that they could justify the business costs for it. And so if they did something like that, I think that would be fascinating. But I don't foresee it in the long run. But he is in charge of 11. He is aware of 11. And I would love to see more support of 11. And they are working on something for the 20th anniversary. I just did a podcast with Invictus and with Benny from Comic Story and Absolutely PlayStation and Steam Games. He just launched a new channel, and we talked about this. So you guys can go check that over on Ginger Gaming Radio if you guys want more information and more insight into Final Fantasy 11. Because next year it's the 20th anniversary, and they say something big is coming. I don't know what that big is, but man, if it was Unreal Engine, I think I'd tear up. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, for me, I get nervous about throwing something away when I think people underestimate how much it would take to rebuild what we have. Mm-hmm. Because it's not about 6.0, it's not about 7.0, it's not about content patches. It's about the fact that we have a backlog of work. And so starting in a void, yes, you get to take your knowledge with you, but you don't get to take your work with you. And so, when you go to a new job, yes, you have everything you've learned from your previous job. You have everything that you're really good at, but you have no reputation there. You have no relationships with the other people that work there. You have no portfolio of work there. You have no knowledge of their systems. And so when you go into a new game, Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2, it's different. And there's not as much content there. And so for me, I would rather see 14 go through engine overhauls. I would rather see them things like what you're describing with the hardcore server. I would rather see them go to places like Xbox. I would rather see them take more risks with alternate forms of gameplay and say, hey, we've dropped to 1 dungeon per patch, but we're going to add a deep dungeon plus mode. We're going to savage mode. We're going to add savage role quests. And, we're going to add more things like Ishgard Restoration. We're going to just broaden the game to make it do more things or try new things, and then we're going to cut what doesn't work, and we're going to build in a new direction. And over time, it won't represent what it would, but I would rather do that gradually through a learning and iterative process where each expansion we explore a set of ideas, we keep what works, we toss what doesn't, and rather than this kind of it's really fun and really easy to kind of throw it in the bin. When you're playing SimCity, it's really easy to say, man, I'm just going to start over. there's a value to sticking with it. There's a value to
Yeah.
seeing if you can learn from and fix and getting deeper into it than just saying, I'm just going to start over every time it gets to the point where I feel like it's holding me back.
Do I think that Final Fantasy 11 is the 11th shard of 14? I don't, but I would love to be wrong. I would love to see more of a connection with 14 and 11.
What a crossover event that would be. You think Nier was canon?
Well, you've already had crossover events with 11, so there is canon already to it. Shantoto, a popular character from Final Fantasy 11, has been in 14, and they did this big event with it. It was awesome that we've seen other events that have connections to 11. So the theory is that maybe 11th is the 11th shard. I don't think it is, in the sense that, is it like Vanadil, or is it a version of Vanadil in the 14 universe, or something like that?
A remaster of 11,
yeah,
announcing canonically that it is the 11th shard, and with a new piece of content tied to it, and a content piece such as an Alliance raid series or a side quest series or a trial, inviting me to try 11 style mechanics within 14, maybe an 11 style diadem or something like that, allowing me to go get invested in that space. That's the sort of thing that could probably bring me over, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sort of thing that could say, well, guys, we're going to be playing 11 this week.
It would be interesting. It would take me 20 years, and I finally would get Chris to play Final Fantasy 11. I think there are some requirements, though. Like,
shut the channel down. Goal complete.
Goal complete. my
longest, most effort-driven con ever.
But then you'd be like, "This game's incredible! Like, how did I con you? I didn't con you." Last note before we wrap up, because I'm gonna go. My kids got swim lessons. I'm gonna go cheer them on. They've been doing that this week, so I'm excited to see them. They're excited to show me their skills with diving now. So, Casual Nerd Jason, awesome. By the way, I love you. You're always a big, awesome part of the community. I love seeing your comments saying, not that I agree or disagree, but the hardcore mode sounds like it goes against the you can beat the game on any job. Interesting to mandate the group play. And yeah, it would. Like, when I say hardcore server, yeah, like, you could sit here and say everything's harder. Some jobs probably would say, like, you don't want to take this job on this piece of content. We need X, Y, and Z. That would not dictate any change in 14 for anything we do today. Like, it's literally like, listen, we get that there are players who want a real challenge. They want that old school Final Fantasy 11 EverQuest, like, don't go alone, you're going to get murdered, kind of experience. And we made it. But it's over here.
And people will push meta.
Oh, people push meta even in
because Red Mage was believed to be the only one that would stand a chance of fully clearing Palace of the Dead, and that is just not true. It started. I think Red Mage was the first one to get the full clear for the solo towers, but people now are like, what other jobs can I do it on?
Yeah. So it's just it would be something that would be an aside. I haven't, it's something that it keeps coming up in my mind and in different conversations. So I thought you guys would hopefully enjoy that Final Fantasy 11 mini cast at the end of our podcast. That will not be in the audio format, guys. So just enjoy it with us here. I'll probably put this up on Work to Game as a video, maybe on Sunday or something like that. So guys, if you're watching the video, you're amazing. Thanks for watching Work to Game. My name is Brian.
My name's Chris.
You are an incredible person. Like, favorite, subscribe, share, and clip. And tweet us your clips. Be sure to tweet us the clips of the podcast or different videos. And that will help me curate those clips and then turn those into fun shorts and things like that. So there's I've got some content plans for you guys based off of the things that you enjoy that we say, or the things that you hate that we say. I'm not gonna discriminate. The anti-Work to Game fans are more than welcome to come in and clip, me kind of.
My wife asked me point blank yesterday if I have hate followers.
You do.
And I said wholeheartedly.
100%. All right,
wholeheartedly.
All right, guys. I'm ending the broadcast. Thanks so much for being here. And you'll probably still see me over on Twitch. Guys, if you're watching here on the YouTube, hit the link. Go check out Chris on Twitch. And tell him, give him your theories. He'll be talking Final Fantasy and talking Guild Wars. So it's going to be a good time. So, all right. Ending. And it's spinning.